Today is September 12th, 2015. Joining us on the porch are host Matthew Wood and musical director Gina Holzapfel.
The best place for family. What are you waiting for? Where friendships run deeper. Come join us on the porch. So glad you're on the porch.
Welcome to another episode of On the Porch Radio Hour. You've noticed that something's a little different today. Your host, Matthew Wood, is not giving this opening address. It's me, Gina, and I will be introducing our guest for today. Matthew Wood is the host of On the Porch Radio Hour, and we're going to get to know a little bit about him and everything that he does here for the radio show and how it is he came to be the main storyteller here at the Wooden Apple Farmstead. So, without further ado, Matthew Wood, you're on the porch.
Thanks, Gina. It's fun to be on the show.
This is fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're going to start from the beginning. You
Always.
consider yourself a storyteller.
I do.
When did that start? When did that happen? When did you start calling yourself a storyteller?
I think when I became a storyteller and when I started calling myself a storyteller they're very different times and very far apart. So I didn't start calling myself a storyteller until probably closer to a year ago, actually. I started telling stories at the open mic at the music hall. My concept of time is not very good. I think I started officially calling myself a storyteller about a year ago.
About a year ago. So a year ago, what you talked about the open mic,
Mm-hmm.
and we're almost coming up on a year of On the Porch Radio Hour.
Right.
So it was when you started telling stories to an audience.
Yes. It wasn't until I did that a few times at the open mic that I kind of played around with it at the open mic. It was something I always wanted to do was tell stories formally, but I had never really considered myself a formal storyteller. And then after telling some stories at the open mic at the music hall, people started saying, "Hey, you're the storyteller," or "Are you going to tell another story this week?" or that kind of stuff. And then I started thinking, geez, yeah, maybe that's what I do.
It makes sense. Sure.
Yeah.
But you said that's when you officially started calling yourself a storyteller. When did you
Right.
start telling stories?
I think I started telling stories right around the time that I could officially form a sentence. I like to tell people that I've done really well at using the gift of storytelling to get myself into and out of a lot of trouble growing up. So I remember telling stories when I was, maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
I used to set up a table every time there was a birthday party or with Thanksgiving or Christmas. I would always find a chance to set up a little table in my living room and right in front of the fireplace. And I would do card tricks, and I would do, like coin tricks and that kind of stuff. And I knew that my sleight of hand really wasn't that good, but I knew that if I could just start talking, that I could get people to focus on what I was talking about and not what I was doing with my hands. And that was always a lot of fun. So I started recognizing that I could do that when I was pretty young.
There are a couple of different kinds of stories that you tell here on the porch. One is your introduction, your monologue to begin the show,
Mm-hmm.
and one is your Tonka Hogan story. We'll get to Tonka Hogan later.
Okay.
But what's your process? How do you create that story? Do you write it down? Do you how does that story form, and how does it come out? How do you prepare for something like that?
I think deep breaths are really important to starting that process. It's always good for me to take a pause and to breathe, and then I just kind of go there. You know, with the sponsorship, it's a little with the sponsors on the radio. It's a little bit different. I do like historical things, and I do like doing research. So I like to find little nuggets of information, and then I'll form the sponsor around that. And it took about, I don't know, maybe 8 shows or so before I decided I needed to start writing the sponsors down. So I've actually started writing the sponsor down, and then I can kind of use my announcer voice, my old style radio announcer voice, and read the paper. So that's kind of how that process goes.
Mm-hmm. Now let's go to Tonka Hogan for a minute. That's, I believe, Tonka Hogan stories is what you started telling those stories at the open mic. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I the first open mic that I tried to tell a story at, I decided I wanted to use my guitar, and I wanted to tell a story. And so I did what I was just talking about with the sponsorships. I did a little bit of research, and I really love Carl Perkins, the rockabilly superstar. Mm-hmm. So I really loved his story and about how he wrote Blue Suede Shoes. And so I decided I was going to learn the chorus, and I was going to sing it, and then I was going to tell the story about Carl Perkins, and then end the story with the song. And it went well. It was the first time I'd ever done something like that. It went okay. But I decided that it was too complicated for me to have paper and notes and to have my guitar and to try to tell the story smoothly. And that was very unnatural for me. So the next open mic, I decided to tell a story. And I was told that I had a very... that somebody appreciated my storytelling style like they do Garrison Keillor from Prairie Home Companion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that I would play around with that a little bit, and I invented Tonka Hogan, and I started telling those stories started that series at the open mic.
Yeah. So you invented Tonka Hogan. So enlighten us. Tonka Hogan,
yes.
Real place? Not a real place.
I'm going to give you the same answer that I've given people when they come up to the open mic. And if you can go there, then it's absolutely a real place.
Right on.
Yeah.
So a lot of people ask you that question then?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
They do. I'm told a lot. This is a historical piece about me that I, growing up, telling stories, sometimes people say, "Oh, come on, seriously?" And I have to say, "Yes, that really happened. Why don't you believe me?" And then I realize that they're having a hard time believing me because I sometimes then embellish stories or I make up stories on the spot to try to entertain somebody, and then they think it really happened, and then I have to explain to them that it really didn't happen. So I get those questions a lot when I'm telling my stories.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Now, people ask me sometimes, they try to get the inside scoop. They ask me, so are all of his stories true?
Right.
How would you answer that?
There's a lot of truth in those stories, especially when I'm telling them.
Uh-huh.
But there are pieces of those stories that are absolutely embellished and created to help sell the point of the story, and to help develop the characters and their stories as well.
Sure.
But there's always a little piece of truth. That's where those stories start.
Sure. So let's go to you being the host of On the Porch Radio Hour. How did that come about?
As you and I have been living together and working together in the county, in Oswego County, and throughout central New York, we've been noticing a lot of people saying, "Oh, they're a local person. They're probably not good. You have to bring somebody from the outside because if they live in the area, they're probably not any good at what they do. They're probably just an okay artist, or they're probably an okay musician." And we started talking about how frustrating that is, because there's a ton of really incredible talent in Oswego County and in Central New York that's just completely overlooked and unnoticed and unappreciated. And I think that there was a couple of straws toward the end of the year last year where we finally said, okay, it's time for us to do this. And so we started the radio show, and I was really getting into telling stories and talking, and it was one thing that I've always wanted to do, is be a host of some kind of a show. I've always loved late night shows like David Letterman and Conan O'Brien, and I always could see myself sitting at a desk talking to somebody, interviewing them, and I always thought that would be fun. So I kind of maybe forced my way into that position a little bit.
So lay it out. What's your favorite moment so far from being the host on the porch?
My birthday show was definitely a highlight. That was a lot of fun. Doing the wine tasting with Donnie Alecci from Ashley Lynn Winery. That was a lot of fun. The county fair was fun. City Hall was fun. We tried to do an improv thing once. Jim Forfaya and Gregory Rossblock were guests on our show, and we tried to do this like improv. We're three guys on a fishing trip, but we're not really fishing. We're just really connecting with each other, but trying to be manly about it. And we added Ruby to it. That didn't go so well. But that was a ton of fun. And I think there was another highlight where we had Max read. I had Max read part of the sponsorship. He was reading a sponsor line, and I had put in parentheses how to pronounce a certain word, and I don't remember what word it was, but he actually ended up reading what was in the parentheses. So he said the word, and then he was like, sounds like this, and then I was like, oh wait, no, that's part of it. And so that was really funny. I had a lot of that was neat. I'm sure there's bigger memories. I have such a hard time answering those questions, so at the end of the show I'll say, oh, there was that one time.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. All right, one last question.
All right.
What in your life has prepared you the most for sharing stories the way that you do in the present?
What in my life? Well, without getting really deep and big downer time, I think self-protection and safety and needing to be able to direct people's attention away from other things so that I didn't have to talk about myself in certain situations, certain times. I've always enjoyed entertaining people and educating, not really lecturing, but, and I can't really use the word teaching, but, explaining and describing things. And I do like attention, but I like to be in control of that attention as well. Mm-hmm. So, that's probably the biggest thing. If I can distract somebody, or at least that's how it used to be. If I could distract somebody, and really get them to focus on something, then they would forget about what was happening or what we were talking about to begin with, and then I could direct the conversation that way.
Awesome. I said that was the last question. I lied. I have one more question.
Oh, good. I like questions. This is fun.
What would be what's your goal for the future of On the Porch Radio?
I'll give you the proper answer first. My goal really is, and it's not. I'm not just making this up because it needs to be the right answer. My goal for On the Porch Radio Hour is really to start to really reach a lot of people and help promote the guests that we have. Because we have, for instance, we were talking about our neighbor who stopped in today to give us some veggies, and Carl was here for the music festival this past weekend, and he joined the open mic and played his harmonica. He's incredible, and he lives maybe a mile from here. And I felt bad because I didn't know that, but it's people like Carl and the shop owners and all of the guests that we've had that I really want people to know about them, what they want people to know and what they want to share. But I want to be able to have a space where people can have that avenue. They can do that comfortably. They can have a quote-unquote interview, because people are really nervous whenever we ask them if they want to be on the radio show, because we want to promote them. We're not asking them to pay us anything. We're not asking for anything in return other than just being a guest on the show. And that's really intimidating for people, because people don't like to talk in front of microphones, so we try to make it as comfortable here as possible. But my goal is to really continue doing that and to help people understand the need to be supporting local people. My other goal is that I have my vision is that I see us someday in the Landmark Theater, and I see us in a big concert hall in another state, or like someplace in New York City. We went to the Grand Ole Opry once, and that building was really cool. And the way they present the Grand Ole Opry is just like they used to do it on the radio. And maybe that's just me wanting to be a superstar or something. But I could see us doing that, and that would be a ton of fun, as long as we were still promoting local folks.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. Thanks, Matthew.
Hey, thank you. It was fun to be a guest on our show. I'd like to do that again sometime, actually. Today's episode of On the Porch Radio Hour is brought to you by Pre-Compressed Helical Springs. It was 1943 when Richard James, a naval engineer, invented this wonderful toy. And it was in 1945 that made pre-compressed helical springs an instant hit, when James demonstrated his pre-compressed helical spring at Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia. All 400 units that James had with him that day were sold in 90 minutes. 70 years later, the pre-compressed helical spring is still a marvel. A simple coil of metal that can walk downstairs and seems to levitate when dropped. It's no wonder, then, that pre-compressed helical springs are a proud sponsor of On the Porch Radio Hour. Two instant classics working together toward the same end, fun and wonder. Put those two together, and you get thunder. On the Porch Radio Hour. You can't see the flash, but you can hear the thunder. On the Porch Radio Hour is brought to you today by Pre-Compressed Helical Springs. You're listening to On the Porch Radio Hour. We'll be back in a moment.
What's happening in Central New York is brought to us by I Heart Oswego. The Oswego Music Hall kicks off their new season tonight with Amy Gallatin and Stillwaters at 7:30 p.m. Visit OswegoMusicHall.org for more information. Oswego's Pride Festival and Parade is tomorrow, with parade lineup at 10 a.m. at the corner of Lake Street and Ontario Street. For more information and a schedule of events, visit OswegoPride.com. Oswego's first annual Porch Fest is Sunday, September 20th from 1 to 5. This free event features local musicians performing from the porches of Montcalm Park and Franklin Square homes. More information is available at OswegoPorchFest.com. The CNY Pagan Pride Day will be held at Long Branch Park on Saturday, September 19th. There will be vendors, performances, and workshops throughout the day. For more information, visit cnyppd.com. Open skate sessions at SUNY Oswego resume this month. Visit oswego.edu for more information. The End of the Embargo is the latest exhibit at the Art Association of Oswego. From now through Sunday, September 20th, Cuban paintings from the collection of Eugenio Basualdo will be on display. This group of paintings is diverse in subject and style, including naturalism, surrealism, cubism, and abstract expressionism. The gallery is open Saturdays from 10 to 1 and Sundays from 1 to 4, or by appointment. For more information, call 315-216-6782. Oswego State Downtown hosts Where Do We Go?, featuring the digital collages of Jeff Madison, a Syracuse-based graphic designer, illustrator, and photographer. The exhibit is open noon to 5 p.m. Wednesdays to Saturdays. Call 315-216-4985 for more information. The Port City Co-op hosts an outdoor flea market at West Bridge and 2nd Streets in Oswego on the 1st and 3rd Sundays of each month from 12 to 5 p.m. For more information, contact the Port City Co-op at 315-529-5177. The next Rice Creek Story Hour is today at 11 a.m. Children must be accompanied by an adult. Call 315-312-6677 for more information. The CNY Arts Center has upcoming classes in cake decorating and a glee club for both adults and children. The Arts Center also hosts a Writers Cafe the last Sunday of the month, with the next session on September 27th at 6 p.m. And an artist meetup is on September 9th at 6 p.m. for visual artists working in 2D or 3D media. Visit cnyartscenter.com for more information. The Red Room sessions at the Wooden Apple Farmstead are a time for songwriters, musicians, and anyone else who wants to build their musical skill and knowledge to get together. We share songs we are working on, bounce musical ideas off each other, and we usually have time to just play a little music. This is a supportive environment where all levels of songwriting and musical experience are welcome. The next session is September 27th at 6 p.m. For more information, visit Wooden Apple Farmstead on Facebook or call 315-591-0711.
Thanks for also being a guest on the porch, Gina.
Hey, yeah.
I heard you practicing this song earlier, and I was really intrigued, and I didn't get to hear all of the story. So I'm kind of hoping that you will enlighten me and our listeners with maybe a little bit of of some insight into this song, because I know it's not one of yours.
Right. I've discovered some old songbooks that have some of these kind of old classic folk tunes that come from different eras and different styles. And so this song that I'm singing today is actually an old Chain Gang song.
Oh, nice.
So Chain Gangs were, did a lot of moving around, did a lot of working, and to pass the time. And often their work was really repetitive. They were hammering. They were doing something that had kind of a natural rhythm to it. And in order to keep going, they created these songs that they would just sing over and over again. So they were, a little bit repetitive, and they had some common themes, like the mean old captain,
right,
and a sweet lovin' mama, and some. That kind of underlying unquenchable thirst for freedom. So it has kind of a real lonesome call to it, and you can feel the ache in it, and the hope for something better. So
all right,
here it is. It's called Darlin'. If I'd have known my captain was blind, darling, darling. If I'd have known my captain was blind, darling, darling. If I'd have known my captain was blind, wouldn't have gone to work till 9:30, darling, darling. Ask my captain for the time of day, darling, darling. Ask my captain for the time of day, darling, darling. Ask my captain for the time of day. Got so mad he threw his watch away, darling, darling. Captain, and I'll land in jail, darling, darling. everybody round to get my bail, darling, darling. Told my captain, you don't know my mind, darling, darling. Told my captain, he don't know my mind, darling, darling. Told my captain, he don't know my mind. I'm a laughing just to keep from crying, darling, darling. If I'd have done like Mama said, darling, darling. If I'd have done like Mama said, darling, darling. If I'd have done like Mama said, I'd be home in Mama's bed, darling, 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 darling. Thanks.
Thank you. It'd be great if you did another song, and I'm just wondering if you're going to do another one of those. You're going to do one of yours?
I'm going to do one of mine. I'm going to do actually a new one.
All right.
I wrote it a few weeks ago. It was the end of a long, long day. I had actually performed. I had something like 5 performances that day, and I had just finished the last one. One of them happened to be being a roving musician for an arts festival in Syracuse. So I walked around with my guitar for 2 hours, performing in different spots around the festival, and then I finished up performing at their picnic as a final performance. And so I was walking back to the parking garage where my car was and my guitar case was, and so I'm walking around with my backpack full of CDs and my guitar, exhausted. But sometimes when the exhaustion happens, the mind opens and those muses come whether you want them to or not. So I'm walking down the street in downtown Syracuse, singing and singing and singing and singing, and hoping nobody thinks I'm too crazy.
Awesome. Does this one have a title?
Doesn't get a title until I record it.
All right. So it's not recorded then either.
Not yet. It'll probably get recorded in the next couple of months.
Awesome. So this will be the first recording of it anyway. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, enjoy.
Thanks. Are you a city with a future? Are you a kid with a past? Are you silently watching? Or do you kiss a little ass? Do you slow down at sunset? Or is that just where you start? Have you given up on everything? Even your heart. This line that you're walking has to have an end. This line that you're talking isn't much like a friend. Are you fixing what's broken, or does it not want to mend? Are you ready to be real? Or would you rather pretend? There's a star in the sky leading me home, between the sun and the moon, over a river of hope. I'll hop a train headed west, 'cause that's just where I go when life takes me down a path I already know. These arrows that are pointing, you left or you right? Is it just a little coping? Is it freeze or flight? Is it exactly what you hoped for? Or did it catch you unaware? Is it just a little apathy over a river of care? There's a star in the sky leading us home, between the sun and the moon, over a river of hope. I'll hop a train headed west, 'cause that's just where I go when life takes me down a path I already know. There's a star in the sky leading me home, between the sun and the moon, over a river of hope. I'll hop a train headed west, 'cause that's just where I go when life takes me down a path I already know. When life takes me down a path I already know. When life takes me down a path I already know.
Well done. I like that one.
Thank you.
July 7th, 1966. Tex Rider, famous for a lot of things, was traveling from his last performance in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he was on his way up to Toronto for a really big show. Tex had written some top 40 country hits, and he was getting pretty well known. He was pretty well known for his music, especially his top 40 hits. He was also really well known for being stubborn. And when he needed to go from one show to another, like on this tour, he drove his truck, pulling his old horse trailer full of all of the sound equipment. Yeah, he took all of the sound equipment himself. He needed to have that. It kind of helped him feel like he wasn't as big as everybody wanted him to be, or as big as he was. Kind of helped him stay grounded and rooted. He was also famous for making sure that he was doing all of his own repairs. So when he needed to replace one of the tires on the horse trailer, he was in a hurry, and he wasn't paying attention to how tight he was making the lugs on that tire. And when he was up somewhere between the U.S. and Canada border, that wheel came off of the trailer. It destroyed the axle, and it broke part of the trailer off. And he wound up in a town called Tonkahogen. And he kept scratching his head and looking at his map. And so finally, he looked at the mechanic and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not finding Tonkahogen anywhere on this map. I thought I was on this road here." And the mechanic said, "You were. And I was hoping to get to this road here." "You will. But I can't see Tonkahogen anywhere on this map." So the mechanic made a really exaggerated squinting face as he picked up the map from Tex's hands. And still even more exaggerated, he picked up his finger and made sure that he was following his own finger so that Tex would follow the finger as well. And they both followed that finger all the way down to where that thick black line on the map drew out the border between U.S. and Canada. He said, "We're right there." Tex said, "I'm sorry, but I don't see it." And the mechanic said, "I don't think you're supposed to, mister. This town was here way before this map was. And I'm pretty sure this town may have even been here way before that border was. So they don't change the maps. They just take the map with Tonkahogen on there, and they just paste that border right over the top. You can't see us." So Tex laughed and said, "All right, what's going to be my bill and how long is it going to take you to fix this? I've got a show in Toronto." And the mechanic said, "Well, it's going to cost you a lot less than it will anywhere else, but it's going to take a lot longer because it's hard for people to find us on maps. And we need to order you a whole new axle and some trailer parts." So the mechanic was nice enough to point out where Tex could stay, at that old beat-up bed and breakfast, with the porch that really needs a new paint job. And the mechanic asked if Tex wanted help unloading all of the equipment, but there was no place to put it, so it was left in the trailer. The mechanic asked if he wanted anything out of there, and Tex took 3 things: his guitar, his clothes, and his rocking chair. If he was going to be sitting on an unpainted porch at a bed and breakfast in a town that was stuck under the border between the United States and Canada, he was going to need to do that in his rocking chair. The rocking chair was a big piece of his set, and he felt really comfortable there, even though he didn't ever really use it when he was performing because he was standing most of the time. But the rocking chair was nice. It was a nice touch. So there he sat on the porch of the bed and breakfast on one of the main streets. There's a couple of main streets in Tonkahogen. They can't decide on which one is the main one because there's a lot of cool stuff on several streets. And none of them really get driven by anybody, so they just say they're all the main streets. And they all go in different directions, so it depends on where you want to go, depending on which is your main street to getting there. But there he sat with a view of the diner down the block, a nice view of the lake in the distance, and a nice place to put up his feet while he sat in his rocking chair with his guitar. And if he was going to sit there that long, he couldn't worry about his gig in Toronto. Nobody was going to be able to come help him. He talked to his agent. He talked to his manager. He talked to the other guys in the band. And there was no help. So there he sat. And he started to watch. Tex really liked to watch people. And he started to study. And he started to learn. And in this place where he was slightly frustrated when he showed up, kind of took that frustration away. He felt like he belonged there. And while he sat there, feeling like maybe he actually did belong there, he started thinking about the stuff that he was thinking about when the wheel came off the trailer. It was almost like it happened on purpose. Like that wheel knew. Because Tex was thinking about all those times that his manager said, "Man, you've got some great songs, but you don't have that song to end your show with." And what he was talking about was a big hit. The manager's philosophy was, if you had a really big hit, that was your show ender. You build it up, you build it up, you build it up because it's the song everybody wants to hear. And anticipation is what makes a good story. So you make them wait. You make them wait. You bring them to a peak and then you bring them back down. You bring them to a peak, you bring them back down. Always teasing them until you give them that shot of what they want. And then you walk off the stage. And Tex was still working on that show ender. Oh, maybe this is a good time to work on it. Can't force it though. Show enders are never forced. Well, one Sunday morning he got up and realized that nobody went to church in Tonkahogen. At least they didn't go to church in Tonkahogen. If anybody that lived in Tonkahogen went to church, they left town. But it had a different feel to it. So he walked down. He walked down to the diner with his guitar. Food must be good at this diner on Sundays because that line was out the door and down the sidewalk. And there was a couple of young girls. It must be a family-run operation, he thought. These girls are too young to be employed. One of them was carrying a tray full of coffee mugs and a couple of pots of coffee. And one of them was carrying a giant tray full of cookies. And they were handing out coffee and cookies as people stood in line. And they walked over to Tex, even though he wasn't actually in line yet, and they handed him a cup of coffee and a couple of cookies. And there were people in line that recognized Tex, and there were people in line that didn't. Usually he'd be more recognizable than this, but when you're stuck under that black line on the map, you don't get to hear everything that's happening everywhere. So he drank down his coffee and he ate his cookies, and they were delicious. He asked for a little more coffee, and then he stood there and he said to the crowd, "If these young ladies are going to hand out such delicious treats, why not enjoy them with a little music?" So he played, and he played. Everybody clapped and they loved him. But he didn't know what to do because he didn't have his show ender. So he just stayed there and played all day, and eventually he just kept playing his guitar and playing his guitar until it morphed into something that sounded really good. So as he walked back to the bed and breakfast at the end of the day, he was humming that tune, and he was thinking about his show ender, and he was thinking about how he could make that work, and he was thinking about his trailer, and it hit him. And he stepped up onto the porch, and he climbed up onto the railing, and he balanced on the railing, and he thought, here it comes. Oh, my wagon lost a wheel somewhere along the way. Yes, my wagon lost a wheel somewhere along the way. And there was a couple walking down the road, and they stopped. They said, "Are you the gentleman that was at the diner today?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Boy, you're good. Whatever you were just singing was real good, too. Can we hear some more of that song?" And he politely climbed down from the railing, and he walked out into the street. And because his name was Tex, he figured he'd better take on that persona. So he slightly bowed his head, and he took the index finger of his left hand, and he just pushed up the brim of his cowboy hat, kind of leaned back on his heels and rocked a little bit, and he said, "Well, I don't have any more than that." But he gave it to them again, and they loved it. So the next morning he went out and stood in front of the diner, and he sang that chorus over and over and over again. And eventually he started to put some words together that made sense. And it was all about his journey, about how he got there and how he felt so comfortable. And that was it. He called his manager and he sang it to him over the phone, and his manager said, "That's it. That's your show ender." So when it came time to pack up his 3 things back into that trailer and get back on the road to Toronto, he knew he had a long road ahead of him. Not just to Toronto, but to having to make up the show that he missed because he was sitting in such a lovely town. And he didn't even care that he missed that big show in Toronto. They'd make it up. People wanted to hear him. And he was going to try out this new song, too. But he had heard some of the town songs as well. And from that day forward, Tex Rider was famous for that song. Even more famous than he was to start before he got to Tonkahogen. But he ended his show with one last chorus of that song, and then he went into his show ender. And so at the end of every show, as the crowd went wild, it sounded something like this. Yes, my wagon lost a wheel somewhere along the way. Yes, my wagon lost a wheel somewhere along the way. This is my home. This is my only home. This is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Hey, once again, you've made it to the end of another episode of On the Porch Radio Hour. And I was really honored to be a guest on my own show. And I do hope I get to do that again, because I learned actually in that interview that if I'm working so hard to help people share their stories, and I'm working so hard to get them to find ways to share their stories, that maybe it'd be good for me to share my own sometimes. So thanks. Thanks for listening to that and being part of that. Thanks for being here. And again, thanks for everybody on Concert Window. I want to thank everybody that came to the farm. And I want to thank everybody that's listening to our archived episodes on our website. And we'll see you again. And in 2 weeks, we'll see you at the Black Creek Cafe in Mexico, on Mexico's Main Street, also known as Route 104. But you should check that out. We start recording at 7 o'clock at the Black Creek Cafe in Mexico on Thursday, September 24th. And until then, peace to your journey.
On the Porch is a production of the Wooden Apple Farmstead, with host and writer Matthew Wood. Our sound technician, musical director, and guest host is Gina Holsapple. Our stage manager is Ray Monet. Find information about past shows, being on the porch, and much more online at ontheporch.weebly.com.